Welcome to Florida State University, where the parties are wild, the girls are hot, and the football team kinda sucks. I'm gonna tell you about my college experience from the perspective of an art student. I just graduated this spring 2021 from the film school with a BFA in motion picture arts production. And my college experience was a bit unconventional because I was in quite an intense program. I only took normal, non-film classes for 1 year. I only took 1 semester off all 4 years of college, and I had the height of my education disrupted by a global pandemic. The first time I came to FSU was senior year of high school for a tour, and then the second time I came here was for my film school interview. Getting an interview is a pretty big deal because they only interview 30 people and then half of those people get into the program. I did not feel super great about my interview. I cried the entire day afterwards, but I guess it went a lot better than I thought because I got accepted. The way that I chose which colleges to apply to was I basically went down the list of Hollywood Reporter's top 25 film schools, and I applied to every single one that had a bachelor's program. And I got into other film schools too, but ultimately I chose this one because of the in-state tuition. Florida has really bomb in-state tuition rates, and I also had the top level of Bright Futures, a scholarship, and Florida prepaid, so this was just by far the cheapest way for me to go to film school. I lived in Salley Hall my freshman year, which is this building right here, so that I could get the classic freshman year dorm room experience. Salley Hall is often considered the worst dorm, mainly because pretty much all of the other dorms are newer and nicer. But honestly, I don't think Salley is all that bad. It's the most affordable dorm, at least it was when I lived here, and I prefer the layout of Salley to all the other dorms. The way the dorms are laid out, all of the suite mates share one common area, which has 4 desks, 1 for each person, and the common area is connected to the bathroom, and then there's 2 separate bedrooms connecting to the common area, which each house 2 people. I'm a big fan of the floor plan because there's separation between the people who want to sleep and the people who want to do work or do anything else, as opposed to the other dorms, which are just kind of one big room, and if your roommate's making like a lot of noise, there's not any walls to separate the people who are sleeping and the people who are doing something else. Welcome to one of the sound stages at the film school. I have a lot of memories of making movies here and having classes in here, having events in here. If you don't know what a soundstage is, it's basically just a wide open space where sets can be built and there's space for movies to be made. This is the part of the video where I get to be very honest and say that I really struggled in film school. I developed depression and an eating disorder while I was in college, and the fact that I don't think film school was a great fit for me exacerbated my mental illness, and in turn my mental illness just made film school seem a lot worse than it already was, and so it was just this bad cycle. I think what it comes down to is that the film industry itself isn't for me, and film school tries to replicate the industry because they try to replicate the work ethic you need in the real world and the kind of hours that you're gonna work in the real world. It was really hard for somebody like me who needed time off to go to therapy and self-care and generally just have time off so that I can feel like a human being. The first semester of film school, I remember I had almost 30 hours a week worth of classes, sometimes more. Plus we had to make these little movies every weekend, and you had to help other classmates with theirs, and your classmates would help you with yours. And then when you were on set, you had a set number of pre-production days, and you would work pretty much every waking hour when you were in pre-production. And then once you get on set, it's union rules, so it's 6 hours of working, 1 hour off for lunch, and then another 6 hours. And then of course, however much time you need to figure out whatever it is you haven't figured out for the following day of shooting. In the film school, it's nearly impossible to have a job, be in a frat, or basically have any kinds of commitments in your life, because film school always has to come first, and film school takes up the majority of your time. Of course, a lot of people still manage to have extracurriculars or like extremely flexible jobs, or they have a YouTube channel, or they work on little side projects outside of school. But for the most part, being in film school is putting all your eggs in one basket. For 3 years straight, you live and you breathe filmmaking. For me, this was very difficult because filmmaking wasn't my only interest. I had a lot of interests outside of filmmaking, and the fact that I didn't have time for any of those interests was really difficult for me. I mean, I'm so young and there's so much to explore, but when you're in film school, you're completely immersed in your craft and on this one subject, and it's all you do for 3 years, which I think is awesome and amazing if you're someone that's like, oh, I know for sure that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. But I applied for film school when I was 17, and I decided I wanted to go to film school because I knew I was creative, and I knew I didn't like traditional school and academics, and I had made some movies with my friends, and I had a really great time. But when you're 17, I don't think you can say with any kind of certainty that this career is the career that you're going to want to do for the rest of your life when you honestly don't know very much about it and you've never actually done it before. Or honestly at any age, because you get older, you grow, and you change, and maybe you realize that your job isn't really a good fit for you anymore. And while I was in film school, I definitely learned about like the dark side of the film industry. Basically, there's a lot of things that are systemically fucked up about the film industry. We all know about like the Me Too movement and Harvey Weinstein and everything. But since I've been in film school, I've heard horror stories about about being a woman working in this industry, especially in the context of sexual harassment. But I think for me, the real reason why I don't want to work in the film industry is that 13-hour days are the norm. These 13 hours can be physically demanding, or maybe you're working in extreme conditions. I read an article about this epidemic of PAs falling asleep at the wheel because they literally can't keep themselves awake while they're driving. They're the first people on set and the last to leave. I don't think there's anything healthy or human about that. I'm not trying to scare anyone or deter anyone, but basically what I'm trying to say is that if you can picture yourself doing anything else, then you should. Because the only way you're gonna be able to work that much and get through it is if you genuinely love what you're doing. And when I was in high school, I would work these long hours on set and I would be like, this is great. I'm meeting so many cool people, I'm doing so many cool things, and I'm learning so much. As I've gotten just a little bit older, I realized that that's not what I want for myself. Once I had spent some time in film school and realized that that kind of life wasn't right for me, I started feeling very lost and uncertain of my future. Because being a filmmaker had been such a big part of my identity, and now it was like, what am I gonna do with myself? Like, I'm in school for a very specific thing, and now that I don't want to do that thing, I don't really know what's going on anymore. When I got to college, I realized that I loved music and acting, but those are probably the two things that are harder to do as a career than be a filmmaker, so it was like, I don't really know how to get to a place where I can make this my career. As for the program itself, I will now list off a list of pros and cons. I'll start with the cons. I think overall, in terms of the curriculum, there's too much time spent on the practical and technical sides of working on a set, and not enough time spent on more theoretical things like story and writing, which is the foundation of good filmmaking. Another con is that film school is 3 years straight. It's a very rigid curriculum. Because you don't have any semesters off while you're in school, there's no opportunities to do an internship or do a little bit of traveling or take a break for your mental health. It's basically impossible to take any amount of time off, which is why if people need to take time off for like health or something, they end up just straight up dropping out of the program. And because there's no time off, it's really hard to go to weddings and funerals and other things in your life that are happening that are super important. And building off of that, another big con, I think, is that because you're just in school, you don't really have experiences to write stories about. I think the best stories we have to tell are things from our own life that we've experienced and things that are genuine to us. But when you spend most of your time in this building learning about films, when do you have time to go out there and live your life and therefore have things to write stories about, especially when you don't have any time off and when you don't get to travel and when you don't get to meet new people and experience new things. Another con is that because FSU is in Tallahassee and Tallahassee doesn't really have much of an actual market for filmmaking or entertainment, there's no opportunities to get real world experience. And another con, which I've touched on before, is that even if you get a job opportunity, it probably will interfere with something in your schedule. I personally have been able to get away on some weekends or just skip class entirely when I have job opportunities. So sometimes those are sacrifices you have to make, but generally if you want to get actual faculty approval to do things like that, it can be really hard. But sometimes the schedule is lighter and you will actually be able to do stuff if you're lucky enough to be able to find something when you have a little extra time in your schedule. On to the pros. Because there isn't an industry in Tallahassee, you and your professors are completely immersed in your education. Another pro is that you get to make 5 short films within the course of your film school career, and they're all 100% fully funded by the film school. When I say funded, I mean basic necessities like food and catering. If you want to do really fancy stuff like pay for a location or fly actors in or buy a huge set or fancy costumes or anything like that, then that's something you have to pay for yourself. But the baseline of things you absolutely have to make your movie is funded by the school, and then by the time you get to thesis, you'll have a fundraiser and then you'll have some money to be able to spend however you want to make your film cooler and better. Another pro is that you have to learn every single crew position regardless of your specialty. So even if you go into film school knowing for sure, like, I want to be a director or I want to be a cinematographer, you still have to do everything. So you get a really comprehensive education in the sense that you learn all parts of the set and what every single person does. And I think that makes you a more well-rounded filmmaker. Another pro is that the faculty and everybody that teaches here is truly really great. A lot of the professors here genuinely care about you and genuinely care about helping you. And a lot of them have a ton of experience working on really big movies. And 5, which is probably the biggest pro of all, is that you get really close with your classmates. Every class starts out with 30 people and sometimes it starts to dwindle as the years go on. Because you spend so much time with each other together in classes and making movies, you get really close to each other. There's a lot of bonding and camaraderie within the film classes, and it's something that's really special. A lot of people meet their best friends, their lifetime creative collaborators, or even their significant others while they're in film school. I think in my class there's like 6 couples, and a lot of them have been together for a long time. So there's definitely a lot of connections formed within the people that you go to film school with. I would say if you go to film school, you're not going to have any problem finding jobs working on a set. There's a huge alumni network within FSU Film School, and even if film isn't exactly what you want to do like me, there's a lot of alums doing other things as well, and you can connect to those people. Overall, even though I had a lot of negative things to say about film school and the film industry itself, I learned a lot in film school. I made a lot of great memories. I met a lot of really cool and great people, and even though I don't plan on working in the film industry, I learned a lot of skills that have a lot of creative applications outside of just making movies. In conclusion, college was the most depressed I've ever been, but also probably the happiest I've ever been. I was in a band and I had the best time performing with them and making music with them, and I met some people that I hope I will be friends with for the rest of my life, and I had my first long-term relationship while I was in college. Most importantly, I learned and I grew so much during my time in college, and I have a lot of fond memories of this time. And even though I have no idea where my life is going career-wise, I have people I can lean on and talk to, and I have a degree that gave me a really strong foundation as a storyteller and as a visual artist, and I know that I'll be able to take those skills and figure something out. Thanks for watching. I hope some of this was interesting if you're not somebody that's trying to go to film school. I will see you again very soon. Bye.